Okay, before I get into my subject today, I would like to just make a special request of our YouTube audience. I know that we are in at least 4 countries and many states in America, so what I would ask you guys to do out there in YouTube land is to, in the comment section of the program, if you would just put where you're from. You don't have to put your name or anything. We'll see that, but we won't publish it. I'm just very interested in our audience, where we're reaching. And I also invite any of you to let me know what you would like me to talk about. Today I'll be talking about a subject that comes from South Africa. So it just happened to go in line with what I was going to talk about today, about the renewing of the mind. So that's the subject, life, the renewing agent of mind. In 1947, there was a major discovery made, and that was the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it didn't really surface even after it was discovered. It was a period of time that the discovery happened. I think it was found in jars in something like 9 or 11 caves. I think it might have been 11 caves. They found a few at a time, but it was a significant amount of information, and people were very anxious to hear about it, but it was an extremely controversial period. There was a lot going on. It was not a clean discovery. There were a lot of politics that got involved, and one of the players in that aspect was the church. They were apparently scared to death that something was going to be discovered that would blow the theological foundation of Christianity. They were afraid they might find some writings of Jesus or writings that were done by someone that knew him directly. We don't have any of those, you know that. The first writings came about 40 years after, actually, Paul's writings in early 50s AD. But anyway, I find that very interesting, that why would the church be afraid of discovering an original document from Jesus or somebody close to him? In other words, why would the church be afraid of the truth? Because if something was uncovered that is different from the theological foundation that's been built, if it can be threatened, it ought to be threatened. And I think that's true with all of us. You know, each of us as individuals, we all have a certain perspective that we take on life, and that we take on God, and we take on ourselves, and religion, the whole thing. We hold a certain perspective. And if we are doing our spiritual work, that perspective will from time to time become threatened. And instead of recoiling in fear, we should welcome that. Because the truth, and I thought about this, you know, the church, and I'm talking Catholic and Protestant, not just one, it's all of them that felt this and that expressed this, that this surfaced. If your theology can be threatened, then it's not truth. And that's, you know, what is this whole religion thing about? It's about getting to the truth. And so I find that very interesting. And so we have to protect something that we're not sure is true. And we're pretty good at that. You know, we have a pretty good response to doing that. And we know when our buttons are pushed by our response, by how vigorously we try to protect what is being threatened. Well, this is true not only back then, this was 1947 when the discovery was made, it's true today. There are so many subjects that are floating around right now, everything from climate change to vaccinations to who we voted for in elections and so forth, that we can't even discuss because they've been politicized. And that's the way to shut people up, is to politicize the subject they're interested in discussing. So we can't put a thing on the table these days and talk about it. And I'm not getting political. I'm saying this is a mistake that we as a country are making. This is a mistake that we as a world are making, because we're not protecting truth. We're not defending truth. We're defending propaganda. And that is something the church has always been good at. And I think why most of us have chosen to walk a path like this. We should not be afraid to put anything on the table and discuss it with a clear mind. But we would have any problem we would have in this church, I would take any one of you, and I know that we're on both sides of the aisle, I would take any one of you and put you at a table and say, let's figure this out, and you do it. We would know how to do that. As a country, we're having kind of a hard time with that. As a world, we're having kind of a hard time with that. Religion has always had a hard time with that, because we're protecting theology, not truth. So it's important for us as individuals to come to the place where we know the difference between that. Am I defending something that is true, or am I defending some propaganda I've been given? And that's, we don't always know. It's hard to find what is true about some things. And the reason it's hard to find what is true about some things is because we will not discuss them. We can't without breaking into a big argument. And I think that's very unfortunate. That things like climate change, for example, is an issue that affects all of us in some way. So let's all of us be able to talk about it without saying, well, you take that side, so you must be a Republican, or you take that side, you must be a Democrat. That stops the dialogue. It stops the ability to get to a solution. And in religion, it's the same thing, in the spiritual path. And when we step upon the spiritual path, hopefully we're setting aside a lot of those kinds of barriers. And it's that to me is refreshing. And that's what I'm doing with the book that I'm working on, is I'm trying to get down to, what did Jesus teach? Who was this man? Not what does the church say he was, because that's propaganda. I want to know who the man was. And I think that there's enough of the man preserved in the sayings that we have that we can actually find him. We can get pretty close. And as I'm approaching this project, I'm saying, when I read a saying of Jesus, I ask the question, does this sound like something a mystic would say, or does it sound like something the church would say? And so there's two voices. There's the voice of the evangelists, the writers, the authors, and there's the voice of Jesus. And so that's the challenge that we have, is getting to the truth, because it is the truth that sets us free. I don't know anybody that's been set free with propaganda. Do you? I don't know anybody. It's always half and half. Propaganda addresses one half of a group. Truth addresses everybody. And that's what we want to make sure we're doing. That's what I try to do here. I probably offend people in just my common talk, my common thinking. But if you're offended, it's because you're protecting something that maybe you need to look at. And that's, I include myself in that. And when I'm offended by somebody, I say, why? Why does this Bible-thumping evangelist offend me? Well, they don't really offend me. I just don't agree with them. And I would be happy to sit down and explain why if they wanted to know. They don't usually want to know. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the whole idea is renewal of the mind. The picture I have up here is a picture of the sea churning. And I like that. I like that. That's what came to me as I was thinking about this. And I've been stood by the sea many times and have seen that. And there's a constant renewal, an ebb and flow going on all the time. And that's really where our mind should be. What we tend to do is freeze it up so nothing moves. We want to get to a place where we don't have to go beyond that. We don't have to think beyond that. But a theology that can be threatened should be threatened, whether it's a personal theology or the theology of a group. And I'm not saying that it's our job to attack, to tear down, but to be unafraid to speak the truth as we understand it, as we experience it. Because if we don't do it, who will? You just don't hear it out there. You hear one side or the other. And of all places, in your own personal life, the truth should be spoken. And that's kind of what I hope to stir up today. Off to a good start, probably. So Paul is the one that laid this out in a way that I think is very important. And by the way, I just lit the green candle. The green is our first Sunday in Advent, and that is symbolic of life and enthusiasm. It's the evergreen idea, eternal life. So we're taking that position today. But Paul wrote in Romans, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind." So I was just talking about being conformed, buying into a certain line of propaganda or a certain line of thinking and saying, that's what I believe. I like that because it feels good. It fits my paradigm, and so I'm going to hang on to that. But that is also being conformed to the world. It's being conformed to a certain perspective. And to understand any of this, see, that's what I'm doing with my own book research, is I'm looking at a scripture and trying to understand both sides. I totally get why the evangelists wrote as they did. I totally get what they were trying to do and trying to sell. That Jesus was gone, and now they have an image of Jesus they want to present. And he's coming back, and all that story. But they were doing it for a reason. And a lot of good came out of that. We don't want to discount that, because a lot of good came out of people rethinking kind of this old covenant. But this idea of don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. We want to know why we're doing this. All we have to do is ask ourselves and listen to ourselves, do I feel free from where I am right now? Do I feel like my life is just right and I'm on the right track? And I hope we all do feel that way. But if we don't feel that way, then it's time to open up to something else. There's something we're not experiencing here. Because if the full presence of God is always with us, that means we could experience what any mystic has experienced right now, that we have that ability, we have that capability. But we don't experience it because our minds are in a certain track, and we're not open to that possibility. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm just saying, to me, the reason that we come to a place like this is to be reminded of these kinds of ideas, that if I don't like my life as it is, maybe it's time for a renewal of mind. Maybe it's time for a new way of experiencing things. This oft-quoted passage from Paul represents a common theme of Jesus. His references to things like new wineskins, new cloth, the need to be reborn, all carry the theme of renewal. As our first topic of this Advent season, we focus on the opportunity to release the old elements associated with the paradigm of separation from God and open ourselves to the renewing truth of oneness. So we have some images of wineskins, we have images of cloth being repaired, and we have a baptism, which is kind of the only picture I could think of for finding to represent the new birth, because that's what it is. You go in one thing, come out another. And it's, but Jesus talked about this a lot, and seeds. He talked about seeds, how you drop seed in the ground and it dies, and then it comes up again as something new. The renewal of the mind, that was kind of his main theme, I think, if we look at it from his perspective. And again, if you separate what the church tries to say, and by church I mean early church, and when we hear that Paul was writing to the church in Rome for example. We may have this picture in our mind that it's a big edifice, that he's writing to all this big group of people, and they've got pipe organs and whatever. It's people like this. It's a setting like this. This would be a church that Paul would write to. It'd be us. And probably a lot of them were very small groups. There were probably some very big groups, but they met in houses. And once in a while they would rent a place. But when you think of church, don't think of it and think of this. You know, this, I mean, I'm redefining church myself, because we're in a situation now that's probably very much like the first century church. It's people getting together in a rather informal feeling of a setting. So he's writing to all these people, and he's just telling them, don't get locked into your perceptions of the world. Don't get locked into your perceptions of yourself, and especially of God. But Jesus said, those who, this comes from the Gospel of Thomas, and I really like this. This is not in the canon version of the Bible. It's the Gospel of Thomas. It was just discovered, or a full version of it was discovered in 1945, 2 years, in fact, before the Dead Sea Scrolls. In the Nag Hammadi Library, it's called. But Jesus said, those who seek should not stop seeking until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed. When they're disturbed, they will marvel and will reign over all. And after they have reigned, they will rest. So if we're not disturbed on occasion, maybe we're not seeking too hard. Maybe we're seeking to not be disturbed. You know, that's kind of my preference, actually, to find places where, actually, I do love to be disturbed, but I like being the one that is doing the disturbing. I would rather you leave me alone, if you don't mind. But when I'm disturbed, my mind lights up. That's when I am working on some project, some writing project, and I come across something that I hadn't thought of before. It's like the lights come on. And so what I have to do then is go back and look at everything I wrote before that to see if it matches, if I can fit that in somehow. It's a pretty interesting process. But that is a disturbance, and it is a good disturbance. It's one that we want. It's the kind we want. It's very stimulating. And I think of writing, it's a challenge, but it's very therapeutic, and you're always questioning yourself. You know, that's the beauty of it. And that's why I don't go to psychologists, shrinks and stuff, because I take care of my own business at home at the computer. But this is to be disturbed. That's what Jesus is saying here. And the Gospel of Thomas, I've told you before, it's a list of 114 sayings. There's no story. It's just 114 sayings, and they almost all start like this. Jesus said, then there's something that follows. Sometimes it's very close to what you find in the Gospels, and sometimes it's very weird, very different. So, but if you were charged with, say you were a gospel writer, and no gospel had been written yet, but you have 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, and your job is to put that in a story. You see some of the challenges that would be involved. These would be very precious sayings because, they've been passed down for 40 years, and you end up with them on your desk. And your job is to take these sayings and put them in a story form. And so that would be quite a challenge. And you'd have to kind of alter some of them maybe to get everything to fit. You already know the story because you've been listening to it. People have been talking about it for 40 years. And you would be familiar with it. So your job would be to tell this story in an interesting way, but put these sayings of Jesus into it. And then you have a pretty good idea of how the Gospels came about, at least Mark, the first one. The other two stole Mark. Plagiarism was totally okay, but they were plagiarists. All of them were plagiarists. They didn't give Mark any credit, for it at all. John took it and totally revamped it. We don't know if he used Mark or not, but John stands completely as a separate gospel altogether. But that's what you would be faced with if you were that writer. And I've tried to put myself in his place. I almost took the Gospel of Thomas and did that one time, but then I thought that's way too much work. I've got better things to do. But it's an interesting thought, anyway, to look at. It's online. It's free. You can find the Gospel of Thomas anywhere, and it's very fascinating. And you'll read it, and you'll say, I like some of this, and some of it I don't. But don't we do that with the Bible? I do. So we're looking at a shift in values. It is probably fair to say that most of us evolved to the idea of the kingdom of God as an internal rather than external phenomenon. If so, we may still find ourselves stealing glances to the heavens as we pray our way through one of our life's challenges. Anybody do that? I think we all do it. It's just so ingrained in us, this God with skin on, this anthropomorphic presentation. It's hard to get away from that because we're surrounded by it. How many of you have seen a picture of God? I have. I've seen a picture of somebody's idea of it. That's what we're looking at when we read the Gospels. We're looking at somebody's idea of a picture of Jesus. We're looking at somebody's idea of a picture of what he represents. And so the idea of a renewal of mind, see, that's what I love about critical scholarship, is they don't do that. They jump into this Bible study with a very open mind. What were these guys thinking? Why did they write this? Why did they include this? Why did they say that? And the religionist, the one who accepts literally the Bible as the Word of God, doesn't do that. What they do is they say, what was God trying to say? It's a completely different thing. God wrote this. What was he trying to say? And what's he trying to say to me through this? It's a very different thing. So the renewal of the mind, that's one of the aspects of it, is we look at the Bible as the work of men, and probably primarily men. I'm not being, chauvinistic here, but I think that's what it was. Because women, in a lot of cases, were not supposed to speak. The very first church Beth and I had, was in Bay City, Michigan, and that group had purchased a Jewish synagogue. And the bottom floor was for the men, and the balcony was for the women. And, that's how they thought. So the Bible was probably produced by men, but the women probably told them how to write it, if I were guessing. So they were there. You can be sure of that. So as this renewal of the mind, this shift in our spiritual values occurs, so does our enthusiasm for our new inner-directed approach to life. We're gradually learning how to avail ourselves to this inner fountain of guidance and comfort. So it's a process that we're doing. It's not something we find in a book, and books help open the mind, help direct us in our thinking. But I have reached a point where I don't read too much of other people's stuff. I would much rather go to my own well and draw from my own water and drink from that. And there's a danger there of getting a little bit stagnant sometimes. That's when you open somebody else's book. And I do that. But it's what brought you to this place on your spiritual journey? It's not the book you read or the library that you have in your home now. It's you. Because you picked every one of them. And you picked up certain ones that spoke to you and jumped out and said, I agree with this because I already knew this is true. And you're responding to that. So part of the renewal of the mind is saying, I trust myself. I trust this inner guidance. I trust this inner prompting that is pushing me to get outside of the orthodox way of thinking, whether it is religion, politics, social standards, whatever it may be. Covers every base, every area in life. We're here to let our light shine. Our light's never shone before. We're the only ones that can let it happen. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to think of it too. The renewal of the mind is to come to grips with that fact that I am a unique expression of the infinite. There has never been a me before. I'm here to do and to be what I am. And that brings us to the next thing is when Jesus suggested the need to become as children, he was pointing to the childlike trust that positions the mind in a receptive and inquisitive mode. The life energy bubbling up in us is like the new fermenting wine that requires a mind free of the preconceived limitations of the old wineskins. When we were coming in this morning, we got a little bit of snow. I guess you guys probably noticed we got a little bit of snow. We don't get all that much here. But when we get snow, I looked out and I thought, well, do I need to shovel the sidewalk? That's kind of my first thought. It's pretty, especially I was out early when it was still dark and there was a big moon out there, and there's nothing quite like a moonlit, snowy night. It's just bright. Everything's so bright. It reflects it, and you can see all over the place. But on the way in here, there were a couple of kids that were jumping in the snow. They were at a hotel there off Patterson, and they were jumping in the snow, just having a great time, and rolling around on the ground and all of that. So I thought, that's a childlike attitude toward snow. And I remember that because I used to love snow. The primary reason I love snow, especially during the school season, is we might get to close the school and wouldn't have to go. But that's I can't do that anymore. But their whole attitude, was just comparing to how I thought about that at first was, this will make me have to work, and they're having a great time, and that's a childlike renewal of the mind. And another one that happened was we have a neighbor boy across the street. He's probably 9 or 10, and he's learning the ropes of lawn care. So they've got this tree out front that just dropped a ton of leaves, and he was out there raking them up. Was doing his duty, learning how to do what you do when you have a yard and trees. So he was doing that, and his little sister, probably 2 years younger than him, just a little girl, she comes out, she jumps right in the leaves and then starts throwing them at him. And he's first, you could tell he's a little upset. You're upsetting my adult behavior here. I've been told to rake these leaves, and here you are messing them up. Well, she kept at it, kept provoking him, and the next thing I knew, he was jumping in the leaves and throwing them back at her. And they were just having a good time. And so they messed up the whole pile. Well, that's kind of a childlike attitude. That's a renewal of mind where, okay, we don't have to pile these things up just so right now. We will have a little fun. We'll enjoy the journey. We'll enjoy this whole endeavor. It's not being childish, although maybe sometimes childish is okay too. But childlike, that's what I was seeing is these kids are playing. They're doing what we kind of forget how to do, as we get older, because somebody might see us, somebody might accuse us of being childish, and we don't want that to be done. So likewise, we do not want to try to simply patch our old garment thinking with a few positive affirmations. Probably all have done that. We become willing to let our mind become an entirely new garment. And I say we become willing. I don't say that we do it overnight or that it happens, very rapidly. We become willing to be childlike. We become willing to replace that garment. I've got clothes that I've had for years and years and years. I was looking at that picture album I was telling you. It was our 5th anniversary here in Grand Junction. And I was wearing a shirt that I wear usually in the morning when I'm up. And it's a flannel shirt, and it's got a big hole in the elbow that Beth tried to fix, but she put a new new patch on an old garment and it's not holding too well. Not anything, not her fault. I don't care if it's got a hole in it or not, frankly, because I don't plan on putting a tie on it and coming out here and talking to you guys. But it's, I don't even know where I was going with that. Oh, well, just the idea that we like the comfort of the old garment. And it's a hard thing to give up sometimes. But then I also realize I have a new flannel shirt, and I kind of like that one too. And I'll probably send it through the same regiment that I did the old one, that it'll end up with its hole in the sleeve as well. But we feel comfortable in the old clothing, in the old garment, and so we do patch it. I remember as a kid, my grandmother would taught my mother, I guess, how to darn socks. Anybody ever heard of that before? And you know how she did it? You ever heard of the light bulb method? You darn socks, you put a light bulb in it over the hole and sew it up. Well, we don't darn socks anymore. I usually use mine to clean things or do something with them. I don't, but I usually will wear them out. But anyway, we become willing to let go and to get used to how good it feels to have something new. There's nothing wrong with the old, and we will carry the old, for forever probably. But it's what dominates us, what dominates our life, and that's what we want to look at. That's the challenge we constantly have. The fact that you and I have already responded to a new way of thinking of spiritual matters indicates that we are engaged in the transformation Paul refers to. This is not an overnight process. There will be times when we find ourselves clinging to the old, even as we long for the new. As we affirm the renewing fountain of life welling up within our being, our enthusiasm for this new direction grows. The cosmic wave, as I now like to think of it, rises from within, transforming the way we experience the world around us. So renewal is the beauty of the renewal of the mind. We're not required to change the world, only to experience it in a new way. And I like that feeling. I like how I feel when I say that, because so often we look at life and say, I don't like this. I don't like this situation. I don't like this person, this relationship. I don't like the way this is going, so I need to change it. If we start by renewing the mind, by allowing that cosmic wave to rise in us, it gives us another way to see things and another way to experience it. And we may discover that is not so bad after all. That's not my problem. My problem is the way I'm seeing. So that's the renewal of the mind. It comes back to us always. And I guess if you're going through some challenge in your life, take a look at some of these ideas. How can I renew my mind in the midst of this experience? And it's often just in letting go, just in saying, okay, I'll become as a child. I'm willing to open myself to something new and something important. Why don't you all applaud for me so we can get that on tape and we can... All right. I'm going to leave all that on there. So I just want everybody to know that I have a live audience here and that you are very much alive and that you are renewed and ready to go in new directions. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. If you'd like to help support this ministry, just click the donate card at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Your financial support means a lot to us. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in independent unity, and have a wonderful week.